there are certain things that even if you don't play well, that you'll win, and one of them is length. Denver's just long. Points in the paint, 64-32 Denver. Rebounding, 57-32. Now, when you combine their length with their effort, it's just, those are staggering numbers. It's that Denver's really long. Remember, Lakers got a little bit of a break. Steven Adams, Brandon Clark were out against Memphis. Smaller team. Warriors up next. Kept Looney off and off the floor. Smaller team. How big the Lakers looked in the first two series and how small they looked against Denver. Jokic is, not only is Jokic big, but he plays long because, he shoots the ball above his head. So his game is very much shoulders up, and when he dribbles the ball, unlike a lot of big men, he turns on you. So he puts that big butt and that hip in you. So he gives you no shot to take it away. Like most bigs, as you know, you played college basketball, coaches preach it. Don't put the ball on the floor. Jokic he never puts it on the floor, usually within 6 feet. If he does put it on the floor, it's perimeter, and he turns. So when he gets that ball low, it's all up top. It's all up here. It's just, they don't have an answer for it. So when you combine their length with their effort on the glass, their effort and intensity, this is why they were a number one seed. Like, it was almost tonight methodical. Like, if you watch altitude TV in Denver and you watch them, 70 games a year, you saw this against bad teams where it's like they just control the interior. They play good enough defense. It's a length mismatch. Jokic is overwhelming. That's what they were most of the year when we didn't watch. When you play AD or when you play Bam Adebayo or you play the best coaches, the numbers all come down. But if you start looking at Jokic throughout the course of the season, this was very much a Denver game. Dominating the paint, dominating the boards. Jokic great. Murray played reasonable defense. It felt methodical. It was just a methodical hammer away. You got the same point total almost every quarter. 26, 29, 29. It is... Really good teams make it look methodical. Like, this is what we do. When the Patriots were dominating, it was like, oh, that wasn't a special effort. They didn't fumble. Good on third down. You look up and they've got 32 points. They win 32-20, and you're like, yeah, it was just what it was workmanlike. Denver is a handful.
The problem with size is it's there every single night. There's no version of this where they show up to the game and they're shorter in game 4. It's funny. I had a lot of Laker fans over the course of the season ask me, like, hey, what makes this team different from the 2020 Lakers? And I'd say it's the totality of the size. It's not just Anthony Davis and LeBron James in the front line. It's also Dwight Howard. It's not just Anthony Davis and it's Alex Caruso, this big, strong 6'6" wing. It's Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. It's Kyle Kuzma. They're huge down the roster, and the predicament that puts you in on both ends of the floor. Danny Green was another guy that was huge on that team. He was 6'6", 200-something pounds. Denver's got that type of size on the roster. It's not just the Nikola Jokic problem. It's Aaron Gordon at 6'10". It's Michael Porter Jr. at 6'10". It's Kentavious Caldwell-Pope at 6'5". Christian Brown at 6'6", freaky athletic, just causing all sorts of problems in dribble penetration situations. He's incredibly difficult to screen. Even Jamal Murray is big compared to many of the smaller point guards that we have in this league. And that just leans on you and it wears on you. I thought, Miami played a really clean first 2 games in Denver. As a matter of fact, I think they only got out-rebounded by 8 or 9 total in the first 2 games combined.
Yeah.
It was like the Hoover Dam broke tonight. It was like all of a sudden, all of that effort and focus and energy just broke under the unrelenting size that Denver presents. And the way you broke down Jokic, I was literally watching that tonight. And this is the way I'm going to pitch this to you, because I'm really curious to hear your opinion. If I told you that I thought Nikola Jokic was the most unstoppable offensive player since Shaq, how would you respond to that? I'm saying that yet because I'm not sure. But how would you respond if I told you that?
Well, tonight, 30, 20, 10. So does rebounding count? Do assists count? Well, if they do, he is. There's so much of his game. We talked about this. He doesn't have the power of Shaq. He doesn't have the singular shot of Kareem. He's not as good a defender as Kareem. He's not as forceful as like Akeem or as quick. But the fact that he can take you outside, the passing is Walton, the shooting is kind of unheard of.
He's shooting almost 50% from three, by the way, in the playoffs.
His touch, he's just, when they're different players, but I said this the other night. I remember when Larry Bird came into the league in Sports Illustrated, I read a story in Sports Illustrated about him. Jack McCullum, the great writer. And I went back about 5 or 10 years ago, and I looked up the early Larry Bird stories in Sports Illustrated, and they were describing him like Larry Bird, like, we've never seen anything like this. Now, then LeBron comes in, and he's like Larry Bird, doubled. Like, he's faster, bigger, stronger, and can do stuff and handle the ball. Like Jokic is a combination. A lot of great players are unique. Jokic is a combination of a lot of different people, and he takes the best of Walton. The way he holds the ball over his head, his vision, his body is like Luka. It's blocky. It's a lot of shoulders, a lot of hips. It's hard to get. Charles Barkley was much smaller than people realized. He was like 6'4.5", but he was blocky. He was thick. He got leverage on you. Like, who do you put on Jokic? Like, it's a lot of problems, and I think, I don't think there's not a real duplicate. Like, he just does multiple things really well. Like, Jimmy Butler's a terrific player. He felt small tonight. He felt kind of irrelevant in the second half, like irrelevant. Jokic is never irrelevant because he has so many layers to what he does. It's LeBron. Like I said, I could tell when LeBron was getting old because I would sometimes lose him on the floor. Is he in? In LeBron's prime, like 12 years, like you turn the game on, he was everything. On ball, off ball, passing. Jokic it's just, he doesn't really have what you would call off nights because he does so many things well.
If I had to break it down, I'd say it comes down to 4 things. His overwhelming size. 2, he's a master of leverage. And those are those little spin moves and those chicken wings that you were talking about. It's like half of the battle with strength is your strength is irrelevant if you don't have your feet planted on the ground, right? Like if you're off balance, it's a simple concept. If I had you stand with your feet next to each other and I pushed on your shoulder, you're going to be much more likely to fall over than if you're in an athletic stance and you're squatting a little bit, right? And Jokic uses his fakes to get you to lean one way or another. And then as soon as you lean that way, he's hitting that way. And your momentum is carrying that way. And so now he's by you. And so the combination of the strength with the leverage. And then the third thing is unbelievable touch. There's just nobody in the league that is more accurate within 10 feet of the rim with push shots and hook shots than Nikola Jokic. And then the fourth ultimate kind of piece that ties it all together is the same thing that kills Joel Embiid and Anthony Davis every single year in the playoffs, and that's his playmaking. If you send multiple defenders, he's going to make the right play every single time. Those 4 things combined to me, I actually do think he's got a case. There's a couple other names that come to mind. Steph Curry last year had that type of unstoppable offensive playoff run. 2018, LeBron felt kind of inevitable in a lot of, like, it literally felt like nobody could stop him from doing what he wanted to do. But like, this is his first trip to the NBA Finals. He's 28 years old, and he's already putting himself into some elite company with what he's doing offensively. I thought he was much better defensively tonight too, protecting the rim. Miami struggled to finish around the rim a lot. As a team, they were way better. There were a couple really smart adjustments I saw from Mike Malone too. So we talked about in our last show, there were 2 things that Miami did to bother Denver's offense. It was get Jimmy Butler on Jamal Murray and guard the Murray-Jokic 2-man game 2-on-2 so that they didn't get open shots for KCP and Michael Porter Jr. on the weak side. And then it was the zone defense. Well, they started running a lot of early screens in the offense to get Jimmy off of Jamal Murray before they ran their actions. That was a big part of how Jamal Murray got going. I thought that was really smart. They moved Jokic out of the high post in the zone and actually put him down in the short corner. They were able to get some stuff there. And they were just started driving the zone too. In a zone defense, everyone's in charge of a space, but it's still one-on-one in your space. Like it's still, if I'm dribbling on the left wing and there's a guy in the corner, like I have a guy in front of me. So if I beat that guy, I'm going to engage a different defender, which is going to generate an opening. And there were actually back-to-back layups that Denver got off of just Christian Brown, just ripping through and getting into the teeth of the zone and drawing multiple defenders. So I thought they had a lot of really smart adjustments. I do think Denver's better when they're at their best.
Rent or own, everybody's got projects. Actually, the room I'm sitting in right now, we remodeled. You can't see it off to the right. It was about $1,000 job, but we had to make some fixes, and we did. With Angie, you can request quotes from multiple pros with just a few taps. Download the free Angie mobile app today or go to ANGI.com. Angie has cost guides that can show you what other people paid for the same size project. How cool is that? The pros in the Angie network are all locally based. Painting, remodels, cabinets, they specialize in all kinds of projects. Go to ANGI.com or download the free Angie mobile app today. Angie, your home for everything home.
You predicted a split going into this 2-game set in Miami. I still think game 4 is going to be a total toss-up. Has your view on the series changed at all after tonight?
No, I just I kind of felt like it would be 2-2 heading to Denver, and then Denver would win 2 straight. I think Miami has a way to win, which is they've got to play with incredible urgency, and they've got to hit threes. Denver doesn't really have to do anything. I mean, even the game they lost, outside of the first 4 or 5 minutes, I thought they were the better team until about 8 minutes to go in the fourth. I thought they outplayed them. I feel like Denver doesn't have to really do anything. Miami has to play a certain way, and they often do. But tonight's a great example where Denver matched their urgency, and it just didn't. It felt lopsided. I mean, Christian Brown's an interesting player, the Kansas rookie. First of all, he plays like he hasn't played much. Like he's got such great energy. You can tell he's got such fresh legs. But I thought he bothered, on a couple of possessions, he bothered Jimmy Butler. He matched Butler's energy. And he's a kid that doesn't take the pump fake. You know, Butler just lives just constantly pump faking you. Mm-hmm. And Christian Brown, like a well-coached Bill Self player, just didn't buy any of them. And he's quick and he's twitchy. And it's like, I wonder if it, when you know, the coaching staff, Malone, looks at that, I wonder if they think, you know, he's a little bit of a fly in the ointment for Butler, where he's about the same size. He's really twitchy. You know, Butler's played a lot of minutes. This kid is, I mean, he is just he's like a kid, 8-year-old on candy. He's going 1,000 miles an hour, and he really stays centered. He doesn't buy into Butler's pump fakes. You can put him on Jimmy sporadically, and it's like, it's a little bit of a matchup. I mean, Jimmy's obviously a much better player, but when I watched them tonight, I'm like, oh, his energy's something. He's an interesting matchup. And I think that goes back to something else I noticed. Jimmy plays with such intensity, it burns hot. And he looked a little, gassed. He looked tired. And, you go to Denver, you go up in the mountains, you come back, and it just takes a lot, and he's playing big minutes. So I think he'll come back, play better, and I think it'll be, to your point, I think it'll be very close. But Denver's rebounding and points in the paint edge, like, it'll change a little, but it's not going away. It's kind of who they are. It's how they're constructed.
Yep, I 100% agree. I do think Jimmy Butler has shown over the years, especially in the last couple of years, I think Jimmy hits checkpoints in basketball games where he identifies if there's an opportunity for him to dig deeper into his reservoir. And you saw that just in the last round, for instance. Jimmy in games 5, 6, or 4, 5, and 6 was a shell of himself. But then in game 7, he came out absolutely gangbusters from the jump,
Yes.
And then last year in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics, he was amazing down the stretch of the series in game 6 and game 7, but he had 2 single-digit nights. He had a 6-point game and an 8-point game in the middle of that series. So Jimmy has a tendency to be like, this isn't the one we're getting. He's a very high IQ player. And I think he kind of read the writing on the wall. That was Denver's best punch, and that was inevitable. Like, I was talking with our colleague Liv the other day, and she was talking about Jimmy Butler and what she expected in game 3. And I said, I don't really expect a ton from game 3, more in game 4. And one of the reasons was Denver had won 7 games in a row. Like, they had won 7 games in a row again, and that included wins against Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Like, they were due for a clunker. And when we finished in our game 2 show and I woke up the next morning and I watched the film, it really was one of Denver's worst defensive performances from the postseason. Every one of them was saying it in the post-game presser. It was inevitable that they were going to come out and throw just a great punch tonight. And Jimmy's the kind of smart guy that will kind of poke through that and understand that he's going to live to fight another day, so to speak. I actually I had a topic that was presented on Twitter this morning that really got me interested, and I was curious your opinion. So some of the ratings came out, and the ratings in this particular finals have been pretty good. Not quite where they were last year, but pretty good, and which is encouraging to me. But you had mentioned this on your show the other day, which I thought was super interesting. You said the top 4 players that you think are on the top tier in the league are Giannis, Jokic, Luka, and I think Steph was your 4th. And Steph's getting
they're
older.
just they're not perfect players, but they are literally universally unique. On the planet, they're unique.
Exactly. And Steph obviously is 35 years old, and who knows if Golden State can retool around him in time. So realistically, a couple years from now, it's going to be Luka, Jokic, and Giannis's league. And those are all foreign players. And so my question for you is, do you think it's bad for the league? And what do you think it says about American players and the way that they are developed here in the States?
Well, most of the foreign players are big. Giannis, Embiid, Jokic. It's a lot of really highly skilled bigs. Most of our highly skilled players are wings, and we've almost de-emphasized bigs in our game, right? Our players are it's the reality of what has happened. I don't think it's bad for the league because I think we love basketball. I think we all played it in high school. Hockey is very international. Most of us didn't have a skating rink within an hour of our house. So I think basketball is always going to be fine. It's a story league. I don't think Denver will ever be a fascinating team. I don't think Milwaukee's fascinating. But, the league is always broadcast, Jason, about 6 teams. They put their arms around 6 teams. If your champion's not fascinating, the Lakers will be. Boston not winning is. The Ja Morant story is. Phoenix now, Durant is. I think there's enough really interesting stories. Your champion doesn't have to be enthralling. I think a lot Warriors will be. I think they've got a couple punches left. I think there's enough interesting storylines around the league. Embiid's interesting. Giannis is likable. Jokic is kind of nonverbal. It's okay. I think the league's in a really good space. I think it's a hard league to judge on ratings alone because their YouTube numbers and streaming numbers and social media followings are much greater than football in a lot of instances. They're much more popular on like the IG and on TikTok. So I think the league's in a really good space. And I also think increasingly we know, I've seen more Victor Wembanyama video. We now see international players. Like it's a real thing now. You get games broadcast. So I think it's in a really good space. I think the sport in America that's going to always have problems is hockey. We don't play it. It's not terribly diverse. There are just communities where it's just not a thing. It's very international. Whereas basketball, we do follow their minor league system, college basketball to a degree, not to the level of college football, but we all watch college basketball, March Madness. We don't watch college hockey. When your minor league system is irrelevant, your feeder system, it hurts. So I think football and basketball are in a good space. I think the tradition of baseball, though it trends old, is fine. Baseball, the advantage baseball has, it's good in the right markets. Atlanta, New York, Houston, LA, San Francisco, big cities, because no salary cap, the big cities can afford it. So it's driven by Philadelphia, New York, LA, Houston, Atlanta. It works. But I think basketball's fine. And I think the players have never been more skilled. The game remains creative and artistic. It's embraceable. There's big players, there's small players, there's flashy players, there's flawed players. It's fun. It's a fun, I like it more now than I ever have. I do think sometimes, I like the layering of it. I like Jokic. Denver is a 2-point team. Miami's a 3. I like these kind of old school basketball teams that have length and get points in the paint. Denver is very old school. I like that. June is championship month in sports. NHL playoffs, NBA finals. Now, you can watch all this stuff on television, certainly, but there's nothing like live, and there's nothing like being there in person. For last-minute amazing deals on the best tickets to comedy shows, concerts, and your favorite sport, check out Gametime. Download the Gametime app right now. The redeem code is me, Colin, Colin, $20, $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Go out and have some fun this weekend. Again, download the Gametime app, $20 off your first purchase. The redeem code is COLIN. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed at Gametime.
Yeah, I'm in lockstep with you on this one. I think I don't think it hurts the game at all whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I think the best evidence of this is just the way that Americans react to these foreign players. Like what happened in Philly? They were all like, get Ben Simmons out of here. We like Embiid, and it's because Ben Simmons had all these qualities that didn't resonate with them. And then Joel Embiid was this freaky competitive kid who was super coordinated because he grew up playing soccer, and they just gravitated towards that guy. Denver fans are rallying around Jokic like you wouldn't believe. Obviously, Luka Doncic has been, I would argue his hype and support has actually superseded what he's actually accomplished so far to this point, And so I don't think it hurts the game at all. As far as it goes with the American players, I do think there's an interesting dynamic that takes place, and I think it's a product of how quickly overseas we get players into professional basketball compared to the way it is here in the States. And again, I just remember this from my own experience, and this was really starting when I was first coming up in college. But there's an emphasis in America on some of the more flashy elements of basketball, like the high. And you mentioned social media engagement, and you're right. Basketball is consumed in a large capacity through social media here in the U.S. And what does well on social media? Dunks, crazy highlight, 16 dribble combinations into, oh, look at this crazy move that Kyrie Irving did. And those things are an important part of basketball. But let me tell you this, some of the best athletes I ever saw were in junior college, like guys that can dunk don't necessarily succeed in the NBA. And Meanwhile, overseas, I think one of the things that's been beneficial is I don't think it's a coincidence that all three of those guys are huge, and play a physical brand of basketball. You talked a lot about Jokic and his game of leverage. Luka does the same thing as a perimeter player, to a T. He's just getting you to move an inch, and then he's pushing you off of your spot in that inch to get to where he wants to go to get an easier shot closer to the basket. I think a big part of that has come from playing against grown-ass men from the time they turned 16 years old, and it being all about winning from the time they turned 16 years old. And I do think that we will see a resurgence. I think you'll see more bigs come out of the United States. I think you'll see coaches and AAU basketball and all of them respond and kind of change their approach a little bit. But we're in this situation where it's okay, who's the next American star? Okay, is it Ja Morant? Is it Zion Williamson? Is it Anthony Edwards? Like, those guys feel miles behind the dudes we just mentioned.
Well, and also sometimes with our players, maturity is an issue, right? Whereas sometimes the international players, and this is true when I go overseas. I just came from Iceland for a week. When I visit a country, I'm more polite. I'm a visitor. It's not my soil. I think these foreign-born players come into America. They're very adult, very respectful. Basketball is their life. They're focused. They don't get sidetracked. Zion is sidetracked. John Morant sidetracked. They're much more comfortable here. I think it's a real thing. Like, how do you act? Anybody listening to us, when you go overseas, it's different. You act different. You're a visitor. And I think I was told this years ago by a general manager that a foreign-born player is less likely to leave. He's very grateful for the opportunity to go to Milwaukee. Milwaukee is his Lakers. Milwaukee is much better than his international team. He's treated like the arena's bigger. The players are better. The TV's better. The crowds are bigger. So he doesn't look at it as a step down. That is his Lakers. That's his Yankees. And so I think the foreign-born players come in here with very conscientious, very grateful. And I'm not saying Ja's not grateful, but we're all a little different at home. We're all a little different when we're comfortable. And I think these players come in and they are ready to go. They see this as a one-time opportunity. They're not going to be afforded the opportunity 2 or 3. A lot of these international players don't get the big shoe deal, right? Like, they're not on IG. Mm-hmm. So, like, the basketball is their focus. It's their income. It's their revenue. And I think you see it on the court. And I also think for years and years we talked about how soft international players were, and they heard it. And you hear something over and over, you're not this, you're not this. I think over the last 10 years, they have increasingly gotten much more physical because the Tony Kukoc story was legendary, where Michael and Scottie Pippen bullied him and picked on him. Well, that story got told over there for 10 years, and I didn't like it. So these international guys sharpen their elbows when they come over here. They're ready to play. You can see even the way Luka plays in Jokic. It's a very elbow, angle, initiate contact game. They come in a little heavier. It's almost like it's purposeful weight. They play with a lot of knees up and angles, and I think that's part of the physical game that they want to, hey, they don't want to be pushed around. Kukoc was a great player. He got pushed around in this league, and that stuff made its way back. So I love watching international players.
Oh, I 100% agree. And you're absolutely, like, Giannis uses his off arm like crazy, that chicken wing when he's driving by people. He's got a nasty streak. Luka's got a big time nasty streak. That dude's talking shit on every single possession. Joel Embiid is literally like scoring buckets on you in your home arena and then taunting you in front of your stands. Like, these dudes all are nasty, physical players. I am really curious to see how American basketball responds over the next few decades.